Hello everyone, welcome to another video. I appreciate you being here. I appreciate you watching. I am the one and only Mr. Watson, Christian Watson, also known as Mr. Watson, of course, and you are about to step into the pensive space. So, I'm sure a lot of you do know that the killing of George Floyd has created a ricocheting effect of dynamic, fiery, brutal uprooting of institutions, of ideas, of practices, and unfortunately, or fortunately in this case, of comedy. And among the many dynamic effects of this terrible, baleful killing has been 846. Now, if you guys are not familiar, 846 is a special that has been conducted by Dave Chapelle, who in my opinion is one of the greatest comedians in the history of America, one of the greatest comedians in the world even, and a comedic genius, someone who had a show on Comedy Central called The Chapelle Show for a long time, who his specials just sell out everything, it makes millions, it's just by every metric this man is remarkable. But he's came back with a new special called 846, which, like he does in his fashion, addresses the current social unrest and social ills going on in the country right now. And in 846, and there's already been a lot of response videos made to it. Dave Chapelle attacks people like Candace Owens. He attacks Don Lemon, the famous CNN anchor who always pretends to be morally outraged to get a reaction out of people, in my opinion. And he just completely goes for the jugular on these issues. And he tries to address what he views to be the primary culprit of injustice that is currently ensnaring Black America. Like,
this man kneeled on a man's neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. Can you imagine that?
So again, it's very interesting to see him do that kind of stuff, and it's very compelling, I think, to see him try to not to resonate, but to try to appeal to a certain subset of people within Black America, or within America in general. I don't like this term as Black America, that he believes would resonate with the message. But when he does things like this,
I don't give a fuck what this nigga did. I don't care what this nigga did. I don't care if he personally kicked Candace Owens in her stinky pussy. I don't know if it stinks, but I imagine it does. And if I ever find out, I'll let you know for sure. I'll tell like Azealia Banks, I'll tell.
I personally do not think this is all terribly effective. So, essentially, a lot of people have been asking me, well, Christian, what is your opinion on this entire thing? You know, as someone who is indeed African American, as someone who would indeed be in Chappelle's target audience. And I have a lot of mixed feelings. So, we have to understand something. And this is I think this is an axiom. This is an axiomatic presupposition, I think. If you reason from the premise of race, even if race is present in part in a situation, you will always see race in a situation. Let me back that up again and say it again. If you reason from the premise of race, even if race has a certain part, or doesn't have a certain part in a situation, you will always see race. So, of course, Dave Chapelle said in the special that black folks have righteous indignation because one of their own, so to speak, was brutally murdered by the police. And in his words, in his idea, since this is a phenomenon, and since this is something that happens a lot, and even though statistically it doesn't really happen a lot, but let's accept the premise for a second, that we should then be justified in being aggressive, not violent, but aggressive, in having this sort of outrage. So, in that statement right there are several problems, there are several fallacies. Number one, the killing of George Floyd, I shouldn't even call it a killing, actually. I'm not even going to validate it with such a coy, cavalier title. The murder of George Floyd was an absolute travesty that should have never happened. And it is reflective of a certain individual bias that is integrated into institutions, primarily, not to be amorphous here, because a lot of people who have these critiques are very amorphous. They don't necessarily have a foundation upon which they put the stake of what they're trying to claim. This bias is the law and order mentality. The idea that cops see themselves as the crusaders against people who are quote-unquote evil or quote-unquote bad for the preservation of rights, and those who break the law, and thus they see their duty as to dispense with those kind of influences. This law and order mentality is precisely what has caused so much injustice to happen in the first place. This law and order mentality is precisely what people are invoking, whether they know it or not, when they say, oh, you should have followed the law. This law and order mentality is precisely the nexus of the mentality that dilutes and destroys what true justice is supposed to mean in the conceptual realm, as Plato would say it, in the realm of the forms. The law and order mentality is manifestly, but is benevolent, and it masquerades behind the veneer of benevolence. Now, that is a problem that America has had for a very long time. It's a problem that many countries have. But that is not a problem inherently linked with race. George Floyd was the victim of a mentality that doesn't give a damn about race. He was the victim of a mentality that cares much more about the blind legalistic adherence to certain presuppositions and certain tenets and precepts of laws that may not entirely be fundamentally just. But when Dave Chapelle says, oh, one of our own was killed, he's channeling the necrotic, neurotic ideology that so many people, so many African Americans especially, on the left side, tend to have. He's challenging, and I'm not trying to be derisive to anyone, but this is just the truth. He's channeling the legacies of defeatism, legacies of fear, legacies of determinism that so ensnare our conversation about race. George Floyd, in the eyes of many people, was not an individual who was attacked. He is a representative of all African Americans. And therefore, with George Floyd being attacked, so the logic goes, all African Americans are attacked. But that's not the case. That's not true. That's not true logically. That's not true conceptually. That's not even true incidentally. That's not true. But when you reason, as I said before, when your premise begins with that, guess what happens? Guess what happens, folks? You begin to enmesh yourself into that mindset and you see race in everything. Now, this is not to say that concerns about race, especially as it relates to policing, are not valid. This is not to say that race does not matter. Although, I think race does not matter as nearly as much as it does as Mr. Chapelle would think it does, or how many people who are being activists on this front think it does. But these things are serious issues. But the problem is not the issues, the problem is how we phrase them, guys. And all 846 really does is it phrases things in the just banal, malevolent context that has caused our political conversation to become so wrapped up and so manipulated and warped and destroyed and just chaotic to the point where we can't even have a discussion without a partisan defaulting into their activation codes and touting out a talking point like this.
Is that everyone is pretending that this man lived a heroic lifestyle when he didn't, and I want to talk about what his lifestyle was leading up to this moment and why I refuse to accept the narrative that this person is a martyr or should be lifted up in the Black community and that we should be buying t-shirts with his name on it.
No disrespect to her, but she's an example of this. So where do we go from here, guys? How do we really redefine this conversation around race? What do we do? What we do is very simple. We have to embrace the spirit of individualism. Number one, that will be the foundation for how we fix a lot of the issues Mr. Chapelle was talking about, and which are the subject of these protests that are happening. That's what we do. What we also do, and I'm just going to be quite honest with you, you must understand and accept the principle of the microcause, the principle of variations. These are sciences, my people. These are things that are baked and enmeshed into the scientific formulas in which we use to measure certain things. In this instance, we have used those same formulas and principles to measure racial disparities in the hope, in the attempt, for some people to prove that racism is a systemic, institutional thing that ensnares all of us and is a barrier for black individuals in America. The same science you use to drive that narrative should be the same science you actually use to understand the statistics and the disparities and the differentiations and the variations that you're using and you're misrepresenting. So when you reason from that individualistic gospel, that true gospel, not this false stuff. I almost cursed. Not this false stuff. Not this stuff that says, "Oh, you're black in America, you have a hard life because you're black in America." Look, there are thousands of things in my personal life that have made it hard for me to do things. There are thousands of things in life in general, more philosophically, which is going to make it hard for you to do things. But in the United States of America, at this point in time, your race is not the most consequential of those. It may matter in some instances, yes, but it is not the most consequential of those. Your socioeconomic status, how you carry yourself, how you act, these things are fundamentally more consequential to the outpouring of your human essence than anything else, to the full embodiment, the full success of your human being, than anything else, especially race. Race is a false gospel that is being shoved down the throats of so many people and pushed through things like 846 to be seen as all-encompassing and ubiquitous. We've got to stop that. We must acknowledge the reality of what's happening, but not allow false realities contrived from legitimate complaints, i.e. police brutality, i.e. racial indifference, to become what we believe. And in 846, unfortunately, Dave Chapelle didn't embrace that individual's spirit. He didn't really dig into that. Now, do I expect him to? The guy's a comedian. Do I really expect him to do that? Nah, it's not his job. In fact, he even mentioned it in the thing. It's not his job to be a spokesperson for social causes. It's not his job to be someone who is an emissary for I don't know, as many people on the left would call it, the black body. That's not his job. Dave Chappelle's job is to entertain, but I believe that he also thinks it's to inform vis-a-vis his entertainment. That is his objective. That is his cause célèbre, so to speak, as the French would call it. And so, if you're asking me, did Dave Chappelle succeed in entertaining and informing from a certain perspective? Yes, he did. Did Dave Chappelle succeed, however, in producing and disseminating a coherent perspective predicated upon micro causes, predicated upon individualism, predicated upon that which we can verify vis-a-vis the sciences that are often used to drive false narratives? Did he put together a coherent argument predicated upon that? He did not. Unfortunately, I wish he would have. He did not. And so I will leave you with a word from Marianne Williamson, who is someone who I have a fleeting respect for. I think that sometimes she's used this kind of mentality.
As I speak, I'm going to ask the white Americans in the room to please repeat after me. On behalf of myself and on behalf of my country, to you and all African Americans, from the beginning of our nation's history, in honor of your ancestors and on behalf of your children, please hear this from my heart. I apologize.
Sometimes even a broken clock can be right. She said, I'm paraphrasing heavily, that we have to embody the fact that we are indeed individuals, people. That we are indeed people who are not defined by our sexuality, by our skin color, by our religion, we are defined by that unique essence, a unique spiritual and conceptual essence that differentiates our life stream from every other life stream on this planet. As an old friend of mine once said to me, no one existing has experienced things as you have experienced them, has seen things as you have seen them, and has lived things like you have lived them. Not a single person existing in history, currently, or in the future will ever have that divine privilege. And when I heard that, I thought to myself, oh, you're just bloviating my ego. You're not. Come on, people. Plenty of people think like me, look like me, talk like me. I was dismissive, naturally. Because human beings tend to be dismissive when we're being given bones. So when we're being given stuff that is actually good for us. We tend to be dismissive because this culture is so cynical these days. And I'll talk about that in the future. But then they said to me, no, Christian. No one has seen through your eyes, walked with your feet, breathed through your nostrils, and existed in your body. Not a single person. That's the message that will kill racism. That's the message that will heal the wounds so open and bare in America's flesh. That's the message that can liberate us from false mindsets, false paradigms, and false gospels. The question is, will you take that message and apply it to your life, and apply it to this pain, and apply it to the protests, and apply it to racism, and apply it to intellectualism, and actually do something productive with it? Or will you continue to sit down and pretend that arbitrary characteristics, things you have no influence over, things you have no control over, dominate your destiny? The choice is yours. But I advise you better choose the former if you want to get anywhere in life. As always, guys, I love you. I want to know your thoughts on this. Talk to me in the comment section below. Message me on Twitter or Facebook, whatever you want to do. But ultimately, I want all of you to do one thing. Stay pensive.